How's it going, Knicks fans? Welcome back to Fireside Knicks with your boys, Alex and Ryan. We're talking about Donte DiVincenzo today. This is one of our favorite free agents for preface, and ultimately, the Knicks want him. You know, reports are coming out. Ian Begley said the Knicks and a lot of high-profile front office executives there are really intrigued by Donte DiVincenzo, and I'm a big fan of him. I think that this would be a really good signing. I know the Knicks still have to decide on Josh Hart and the expectations that he is going to stick with this team. He's going to opt out of the $12.9 million option that he has and try to get a little bit more money in free agency, which is totally fair. I think he's a really good player. And obviously you got Jalen Brunson, Hart, Villanova guys, and Hart's been trying to convince Donte DiVincenzo to come to New York, and Golden State can't afford him. So this is a good opportunity for the Knicks to maybe go out and sign him, but their salary cap situation is a little bit murky because they don't have that much money to spend. However, they have a team option on Derrick Rose that's going to be declined. That's $15.6 million, I believe, right there. And Evan Fournier, they're going to trade him $18.8 million right there. So upward of $33 million to spend. That's enough probably to bring in Hart and DiVincenzo. So you bring in a guy like Hart, who's an elite defender, really good rebounder, decent scorer, high energy guy, can play a lot of minutes, and DiVincenzo, who's a really good shooter. We're going to talk about him, talk about what he would bring to this team, and why he'd be a nice asset and rotational piece off the bench. But Ryan, before we dive into the good stuff, how do you do today, my friend?
I'm doing great. As you mentioned with Donte DiVincenzo, let's look at what the Knicks really need, and it's spacing and defense, right? We've talked about this. We've hammered this point home when we're talking about the Knicks lineup, when we're talking about things the Knicks struggled with in the postseason, in the regular season at times. Not that they don't have defensive talent, and not that they don't have some shooters, but the consistency from three, and I do think the three-point shooting, there is a lack of talent on that front. Defensively, I think they have enough talent to get it done, but I think they could always get a little bit better. They could always have a little bit crisper, a little bit sharper of a defensive unit. They could always just get a little more consistent. Tom Thibodeau-led teams are really good at overperforming their defensive talent, and I think that that's something that we also should mention here when we're talking about bringing in Donte DiVincenzo. This is a guy who's he kind of fits the Tom Thibodeau mold, right? He's a 3-and-D guy, can hit some big shots for you from three, can play some tough defense, is going to help Quentin Grimes a little bit. We've talked about Quentin Grimes, the most difficult defensive assignments in the NBA according to matchup difficulty. Not that Quentin Grimes can't be your top defender, but Quentin Grimes can't be asked to do everything defensively. He was paired with Jalen Brunson, who isn't a great defensive player, and RJ Barrett, who really struggled defensively last year. And given the fact that Randall's not the best and most consistent defender either, and that Mitchell Robinson missed some time during the season, it put Quentin Grimes in a situation where you had to do a lot of the carrying defensively. And even when you acquired Josh Hart, oftentimes Josh Hart ran in place of Quentin Grimes and not alongside Quentin Grimes. So oftentimes you leave Quentin Grimes on an island out there, and adding a guy like Donte DiVincenzo, you're likely subtracting one of your defensive negatives. Most likely the guy would be Barrett in this situation if you were to go just making a swap for starter. If you were just to help your bench, you could have DiVincenzo work with Quickly, Hart, kind of defeats the need for Miles McBride, who I think does have some value, and maybe you can parlay that into including him in a bigger deal. Obviously, the Knicks are heavily involved in the situation with Paul George and are monitoring that closely. But again, DiVincenzo adds a lot of shooting. He shot over 5 attempts last year. He was hitting close to 40% of his three-pointers, and that's something the Knicks really need, right? So, when you're thinking about, opening up the interior, playing to the strengths of some of our superstars and some of our top players, and really the guys you rely upon, or we can really say the guy you rely upon as the guy who's definitely not going to get traded, the guy that 100% is going to be here next year, and that's Jalen Brunson. And if you look at what would work well with him, we know that he's got a great floater. We know that he likes driving to the basket occasionally, though he has a really good three-point shot. And we also know that Jalen Brunson is an undersized guard who struggles defensively. So Donte DiVincenzo alongside Quentin Grimes makes your defensive unit a lot better against wings. Again, you think of those dynamic duos in the East, right? I know Chris Middleton declined his player option, but if he goes back to the Bucks, right, it's going to be a nice option to have DiVincenzo to guard Chris Middleton. You think of the JB brothers, the JB and JT. You have the Jalen brothers. You have Brown and Tatum. Those two guys are excellent scorers. Having options to guard not just one of them, but both of them is going to be crucial if you play them in a playoff series. I know that the 76ers are likely losing James Harden, but they still have guys like Tyrese Maxey. They still have, of course, Joel Embiid, who you want to be able to close out in the perimeter. You can't ask Mitch to go out there and guard him on the three-point line. So having, again, two versatile defenders should definitely help. Overall, you're just improving your odds of being able to handle these teams and compete with the best of the East. And I think DiVincenzo, again, not the best player in the world, but definitely makes you a lot better equipped to handle the postseason and handle these tough teams.
Absolutely. Again, he's only 26 years old. He's like in the middle of his prime, looking for a long-term home. He's kind of bounced around the league a little bit over the past couple seasons. But he averaged 9.4 points per game. He shot .435 from the field, 40% success rate from downtown. Look, the Knicks need spacing. You referenced this. They need a little bit more, shooting prowess in the corner. You just don't can't trust Obi Toppin, can't trust RJ Barrett to hit those shots. The question is, if the Knicks go in the direction of Paul George, who they're saying like they're not going to be giving him away, the problem is the Knicks don't have the money to consume that deal and go out and get Josh Hart, bring him back, and a guy like DiVincenzo. Of course, quickly is in the last year of his deal. They have to figure out a way to extend him if they want to. But they're saying he could earn upward of $15, $20 million per season, which is, in my opinion, very lofty. I don't think I'd pay that much for Quickly personally. $20 million plus for him doesn't seem like a fair deal. But I will say this. If the Knicks want to go get Paul George, they're going to have to offload one of their high-priced guys. And I don't think it's going to be Julius Randle because the Clippers probably don't want Julius Randle. It's going to have to be RJ Barrett, who's making $22 plus million per season from here on out. So here's a question for you, Ryan. Would you rather keep RJ Barrett, have him be one of your premier guys, keep RJ Barrett and trade for Paul George, some way you figure out a way to trade for Paul George without giving away RJ Barrett and Julius Randle and Brunson. I don't know how they would do it. Maybe they trade quickly. I don't know. It's like some sort of combination, first round picks, who knows? Or you let DiVincenzo go. I think I'm getting confused in my whole little thing here. I think, okay, so essentially you would either have to fit the contract in two different ways. Either you trade RJ Barrett and his $22 plus million salary, or do you let Josh Hart walk and you let DiVincenzo go somewhere else in free agency, and you use that money you would have allocated to those two players for Paul George. You know what I mean? So like it's either RJ Barrett or Josh Hart and DiVincenzo, but one way or another, like Paul George is taking up that salary space. So I guess the question is, would you rather have Paul George, DiVincenzo, and Josh Hart, or Paul George and RJ Barrett?
Man, that's a tough one. So, I really feel like the fit with RJ is always going to be a little bit weird with the Knicks. You'd also have to move Grimes to a bench role. If you had Brunson, Barrett, George, you'd have to move Randall in that situation. You'd have to get a power forward now. That's a little tough. I think the Knicks could figure out a way to get Paul George and move Barrett and still bring back Hart and potentially bring in DiVincenzo. It would be they're not too tough in terms of their luxury tax situation. It would also depend on their ability to move Evan Fournier, right? So if they can figure out a way to move him, right, could the Clippers be a little more willing to take on that contract, saying, all right, it's a 1-year deal. This is a guy who can space the floor. Again, this is the way I've kind of painted the Evan Fournier situation. If you're trading him, this is a guy he can shoot. If he's a plus offensively, he's going to have value on the trade market. And then the Clippers could view him as someone that can net them a couple of second-round picks at the deadline. And then you get more from that Paul George trade than you originally got in terms of picks in the beginning, right? So if you move RJ Barrett, if you move Evan Fournier, that's a lot of money coming off the books. You get Paul George in. You can sign Josh Hart. If you have to move Toppin, which I think you're going to have to do anyways, and in order to figure out how to fit DiVincenzo in, I don't think DiVincenzo is going to cost too much. I know the player option he declined was like $4 million. I don't think he's going to go from $4 million to asking for like $15 million. I think that number looks more like $8 to $10 million. So I think the Knicks are going to have enough wiggle room. I think they'll be able to get it. I think they'll have an opportunity to get all three players. But if you had to ask me, that really is a tough one. I think I'd say I think like the obvious answer would be just to have Paul George, but then you also have to think about, Paul George, number one, all the risk with the health. Number two, you don't guarantee that you're extending him. So I think I'm going to take that first option where you don't shake up too much and you just add a guy. I think that's a better situation for the Knicks if we had to go like in that situation again. Whenever you decide to trade for a star level player, you're putting all your chips on the table. You're saying this is the guy we've identified as the championship difference. This is the guy who's going to make the Knicks that much better. It can't be a guy you're not entirely sure of is either going to be here after next year or is even going to stay healthy for the duration of the season. I think Paul George is great. I want Paul George, but I'm only willing to do that if I'm guaranteeing that the depth around him is going to be good enough that the Knicks can win basketball games during the season when he's not there and then win in the postseason with him there.
Yeah, man, it's going to be an interesting offseason. I honestly just don't know what they should do in terms of going after that third star. But, if they did run it back and they brought back Josh Hart for a full season, you got Brunson, you got Julius Randle, RJ takes a step forward, and you got Donte DiVincenzo coming off the bench. You still got Quickly. You still got, like, your primary core. But a year together and all that chemistry they built and that confidence they built, I'm not opposed to that. Like, I'm not against that entire concept of like, running it back with the addition of like Dante DiVincenzo and maybe somebody else to help, boost this overall team, because you're not losing anybody, right? Like Derrick Rose is gone, Fournier is gone. You roll that money over into Hart and DiVincenzo. But of course, the player option for Josh Hart at $12.9 million is still kind of factored into their salary space right now. So, he's going to reject that. Probably gets, I think they're saying $17.5 million per season for Josh Hart, but he's a player you can't lose. He was the life and blood and energy of this team for the like kind of last quarter of the year in the postseason. He was clutch. He played through that ankle sprain. I love Josh Hart. They got to keep him. They got to keep this guy around. He is the epitome of what this Knicks team is all about right now and the culture that they're building. And also taking away Jalen Brunson's best friend on the team, not an advisable move in my opinion. So with that being said, I love the idea of keeping Josh Hart. I really would love to bring in Dante DiVincenzo, but I don't know what this leaves us or where this leaves us in terms of acquiring that third star. If you could find a way, like maybe if you trade RJ Barrett for like OG Anunoby, and maybe you want to just go in a different direction and get another young guy, like maybe not as young as RJ, but another guy who has really good upside and can score and can do the things and a good shooter, some good defense, like maybe you go in that direction. You just try to swap RJ Barrett for somebody who you may have a little bit more confidence in as a more well-rounded player, because he's, RJ Barrett's so young. You can probably trade him to a team with a guy that's a little bit older, but a little bit more proven and a little bit better of a fit for what we're trying to do, and maybe a better shooter. Like, there are things that we can do, utilize RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin to our advantage, but again, is it entirely necessary? I'm not sure, and everyone has their different opinions on that, but I'd love to hear your perspectives below in the YouTube comments on Dante DiVincenzo, and if you think that he would be a solid fit for us. But as always, my friends, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Knicks episode.